The year is 260 AD. The once mighty Roman Empire stands fractured, weary, and stretched across too many frontiers. In the east, the Persian king Shapur I senses weakness like a predator circling wounded prey. The Syrian plains shimmer beneath an unforgiving sun, their dry winds carrying whispers of impending disaster. Roman banners rise faintly above a battered army, led by Emperor Valerian, an aging ruler desperately seeking to restore Rome's pride. His soldiers are gaunt, morale frayed by years of war, plague, and rebellion. Yet even in exhaustion, they cling to the standards that once symbolized invincibility. Beyond the horizon, however, a mirage begins to form, armored horsemen glinting like steel phantoms. These are Shapur's cataphracts, heavy cavalry bred for thunder and terror. The stage is set not for triumph, but for humiliation on a scale no Roman emperor has ever endured. The Battle of Edessa erupts with a violence that shocks both sides. Valerian's legions, though depleted, still fight with disciplined ferocity, forming shields against the Persian tide. Dust clouds billow as cavalry crashes into Roman lines, lances shattering on shields, swords ringing in the chaos. Yet the Persians hold an advantage: numbers, momentum, and the relentless pressure of fresh reinforcements. Shapur's forces encircle, suffocating the Romans like a tightening noose. Legionaries collapse from exhaustion and thirst as arrows rain down. For every advance, 2 steps of retreat follow. Valerian, once hailed as Augustus, now watches his army crumble in disbelief. He had gambled everything on a decisive stand at Edessa, but the odds have betrayed him. What began as a bid to secure Rome's eastern provinces spirals into catastrophe. The emperor senses what every Roman dreads: the gods no longer favor their empire. As the tide of battle turns irrevocably, Valerian seeks what he believes to be a moment of mercy. Under a white flag, he sends word to Shapur, requesting terms for negotiation. The emperor imagines diplomacy will restore honor, that his presence as Rome's sovereign commands respect. But this hope is nothing more than a mirage in the desert heat. Valerian rides forward, flanked by a few loyal officers, dust caking his armor, face drawn by years of burdens. Across the field, Shapur watches coldly, not as an equal, but as a predator studying weakened prey. The Roman emperor dismounts, extending words of peace and compromise. Yet in this act of vulnerability, he has unwittingly sealed his fate. Instead of honor, he finds chains. The Persians lunge forward, seizing him. The gasp of betrayal echoes louder than the clash of swords. Rome's god-king is no longer free. Iron shackles close around Valerian's wrists, their clinking sound heavier than any sword strike. A Roman emperor, a living symbol of divine power, is dragged away like a common criminal. His soldiers, horrified, can do nothing. Panic sweeps the field as news spreads. Their Augustus, their supreme commander, has been taken alive. To Romans, this is unthinkable. Emperors may fall in battle, may be betrayed in Senate plots, but never before has one been paraded as a captive. The Persian camp erupts in celebration, while the Roman camp collapses in despair. Valerian is stripped of imperial dignity, his once majestic robes torn, his crown meaningless under Persian hands. Chains replace laurel wreaths, and submission replaces sovereignty. In that moment, Rome's illusion of invulnerability shatters across the world. Shapur I has achieved not merely a military victory, but a humiliation so profound it will echo for centuries. In Persia, Valerian's capture becomes a living trophy. Shapur I immortalizes the moment on triumphal rock reliefs, carved deep into cliffs for all generations to see. There in stone, the mighty Roman emperor kneels, while Shapur, proud and unyielding, towers above on horseback. For Persians, this is not only propaganda, it is divine vindication, proof that their empire now rivals, even surpasses Rome. Crowds bow before the image of their king who humbled the god-king of the West. Whether Valerian spends his final days enslaved, forced to kneel at Shapur's stirrup, or used as a footstool for mounting a horse, stories vary. Yet the message is unmistakable. Rome's rulers are mortal, and Persia is ascendant. The reliefs mock Rome with eternal silence, their stone testimony outlasting both empires. For Valerian, captivity is not just physical, it is the death of dignity itself. Back in Rome, the news lands like a thunderbolt. The people can scarcely believe it. Their emperor lives, but as a prisoner. Panic spreads through provinces, already trembling from invasions, plagues, and rebellion. Confidence in imperial power, the sacred aura that held the empire together, disintegrates. On the Rhine, Germanic tribes push deeper into Roman territory. In Gaul, local leaders begin questioning whether allegiance to Rome is worth the cost. On the frontiers, wonder if the empire has lost its mandate from the gods. No propaganda, no silver-tongued oratory can undo the shame of Valerian in chains. The Senate, once a pillar of authority, sits paralyzed. For a society built on the cult of strength, this single event unravels centuries of prestige. Rome has survived many defeats, but never such humiliation at the very top. The empire trembles on the edge of collapse. As Rome reels, opportunists seize their chance. In the western provinces, military commanders and local elites no longer wait for help from the distant, fractured center. Out of necessity, they forge their own state, the Gallic Empire. Stretching across Gaul, Britain, and parts of Spain, it becomes a breakaway realm, complete with its own emperors and armies. While nominally Roman, it operates as a parallel empire, an open wound signaling the disintegration of unity. This secession is not born merely from ambition, but from survival. With Rome's emperor disgraced in Persian captivity, confidence in the central government evaporates. For the first time in centuries, provincial leaders act without fear of retribution. The empire begins to look less like a single, eternal state, and more like fractured shards, each piece scrambling for stability. Valerian's chains have created ripples that fracture Rome's very foundation. In the west, Valerian's son, Gallienus, inherits what remains of imperial authority. But his reign is haunted by his father's disgrace. He struggles to project strength while the empire falls apart at its seams. Gallienus must face not only foreign invasions, but also internal usurpers, generals declaring themselves emperors in every corner of the empire. To rule Rome during this time is less about governance and more about survival. He reforms the military, leans on cavalry innovations, and attempts to centralize power, but the shadow of Edessa looms large. How can an emperor demand loyalty when his father kneels in Persian captivity? Gallienus fights with skill and determination, yet he is trapped in the same crisis that consumed Valerian. An empire too vast, too fragile, and too fractured to govern. His reign is one of endurance, not restoration. The capture of Valerian is more than a military disaster. It is a psychological earthquake. Rome, once the terror of the known world, must face its own mortality. Enemies everywhere sense weakness. Once feared borders crumble. The myth of Roman invincibility, carefully cultivated for centuries, is broken. Philosophers and historians of the time struggle to explain it. Had Rome lost the gods' favor? Were the emperors too decadent, the people too corrupt? Across the empire, whispers rise that Rome is no longer eternal. From the Rhine to the Nile, the question is the same. If the emperor himself can be chained, what remains sacred? This identity crisis gnaws at the heart of the empire, feeding rebellion, despair, and fatalism. The capture of one man has shaken the pillars of a civilization. Rome is no longer the unchallenged master of the world. It is just another kingdom bleeding. The story of Valerian's capture ends not with his redemption, but with his death in captivity. His bones never see Rome again, his humiliation forever preserved in Persian stone reliefs. Yet Rome, battered and broken, somehow survives the catastrophe. It limps forward through civil wars, invasions, and division, eventually clawing its way into another century of dominance. But the scar remains. Valerian's chains symbolize the fragility of power, the fleeting nature of imperial glory. The final image is haunting, a statue's foot resting on a kneeling figure, echoing Persia's triumph. How does an empire recover when its god-king becomes a prisoner? Perhaps the answer lies not in Rome's resilience, but in its vulnerability, that even empires must confront their mortality. In 260 AD, on the dusty plains of Edessa, Rome learned that even gods in flesh can fall, and chains can bind emperors.